Good, welcome everyone. My name is Jonathan Neal. I'm the director of the Center for Business and Management of the Arts at Claremont Graduate University, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to now the third of our arts and culture conversations this fall. Anybody who's unfamiliar can register for our future conversations at cgu.edu/events, and you can find out more about our center and our art business and arts management programs at cgu.edu/CBMARTS, CBM Arts. Before we begin, as always, I'd like to request that everyone please keep your microphones and your video off during the conversation. We're not using one of the webinar features of Zoom, so this will ensure that our speakers remain at the top of your screens and that we only see and hear them regardless of the Zoom view you have selected. Also, if you have any questions for the speakers, please have questions. We encourage you to put those in the chat box and I will field them to our guests who I am very pleased are joining us today. First, we have Caribbean Fragosa, who is an artist and writer with bylines for both fiction and nonfiction in Art News and Bomb Magazine, Aperture, LA Weekly, with KCET, and more. She is the editor of the online University of California Press Journal, along with Romeo Boone, California, who is her partner, Romeo. And our second guest, Romeo Guzman, who is an assistant professor of history at Claremont Graduate University, newly arrived at CGU, so we're very happy to have them both in our community. Romeo's research focuses on transnational histories of Mexico and the US through the stories of Mexican migrants and Mexican Americans. And he's also been pioneering new methods, along with Caribbean, of new methods of public history that redefine how historians and archives represent the and underrepresented. Importantly for our conversation today, Romeo and Caribbean are also the founders and co-editors of the co-directors of the South El Monte Arts Posse, about which they are going to tell us more. And in particular, about its public history project that has brought us this book, East of East, which you should all go and buy. The Making of Greater El Monte, a fantastic compilation of essays. I've just been reading them this afternoon, a couple more. Caribbean in particular has some excellent pieces in there on Teatro Urbano and the mural movement in South El Monte in the 1970s. So I recommend everyone check that out. And with that said, Caribbean, Romeo, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
I hope that got it all. That's quite a lot. And I'm sure there's more behind that. So I wanted to start today, one, because you are sort of new members of the CGU community, but I was particularly interested in this entity that you founded and have been organizing and directing, the South El Monte Arts Posse. So could you give us a brief description and perhaps the origin story of this entity and this group and what it's been up to?
Sure. Do you want me to kick it off?
You can kick it off.
Okay. I'll start it off. So officially, the South El Monte Arts Posse started in 2011. I was about 8 months pregnant with our first kid, and we thought that would be the perfect time to start an arts collective. And that's what we did. So we basically connected with a lot of our artist friends, and we put on our first show right after the birth of our first child. But the idea for the South El Monte Arts Posse really started several years before that, while I was still a grad student actually at Cal Arts. I was in the MFA creative writing program. And then I almost immediately started working for the Community Arts Partnership program at Cal Arts. We have someone here, Karina, who I met through CAP at Cal Arts. And that was the first time that, if you know anything about the model that they use over there, that helped me understand how important it was to have arts in the community and how institutional relationships could support that in a way that was mutually beneficial and not patronizing, and that really responded to the needs of the community. And so CAP had a program in Watts, in Lincoln Heights, and near MacArthur Park, so all over the city of LA. But there was nothing in the San Gabriel Valley that was sort of outside of the geographical scope of what they did. And that sort of, I don't know, highlighted or really brought to the surface this pet peeve of mine where I've always felt left out, especially in the San Gabriel Valley, where people always talk about LA or the city of LA, and that's really central to the world's attention. But of course, in the San Gabriel Valley and other peripheral places throughout LA County in particular, we get left out. And so I know that I grew up feeling like I wanted to pursue the arts and I didn't have role models for that. And I certainly didn't have any institutional support to have that happen. So eventually Romeo and I decided to start the South El Monte Arts Posse with all of these things in mind. Romeo's from Pomona. And so we were just going to build something from the ground up, however it looked, whatever it took, we were just going to do it ourselves. And I was also inspired by other organizations that were just kind of making things out of their living rooms or out of the laundromat. I mean, there was, I think at the time, 2011, maybe mid to late 2000s, a lot of interest in building these alternate models of creating art outside of an art gallery. And so we really wanted to pursue this non-institutional approach to SMAP. And so since 2011, we've been connecting with artists, but also folding in Romeo's scholarly background as a historian and really opening up our scope beyond just art. We really want to be connected with scholars. We want to be connected with teachers. We want to be connected with educators and other community activists and just people from the community. So it's not just like a strictly arts centered collective.
Yeah, and I would say that it's like a very, very loose collaboration. So I think folks don't always know that they're like part of the posse, even though like we think they're like integral to the posse. They might have like one project. We've never had a formal space, so we've always kind of launched a project and then it'll grow organically or it'll reach its cycle. And we've always invited folks based on what the project is. So I think that's also been very key, right? That there's this sort of flexibility and looseness to both what we do and how we do it and who gets to participate. And I think not having a space almost allows us more flexibility, even though it comes with its own drawbacks, but that's important to note.
Can you give us an example of one of the projects or two of the projects? I know in our prior conversations, you've alluded to some interesting occupations of vacant lots and other things like that. And so I know that that's the kind of street level work that a lot of our students and our colleagues and friends in the arts are comfortable with and used to. So if you could give us an example of what CMAP has been up to, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other really important part is, that space is really important to us and making claims to space and using space in ways that we think are important or that we think they should be used, if that makes sense. Yeah. So one of our second project was called Activate Vacant, and it was a very simple concept, which was to invite artists to take over vacant lots and to do so without permission. So we had a bunch of different projects, but the idea was basically really simple. Like, how can we use this space in ways that are more creative, in ways that give value or give something back, right? So a lot of these spaces, particularly after the recession, if there weren't already vacant lots, there became more vacant lots, right? And then the green tarp goes up and then it stays there. And until someone comes with $1 million and puts what do they put?
Like a condo project
or a condo or something.
I don't know.
Yeah. So we had a bunch of different projects. We had one by Jennifer Natalia. She's not from South El Monte, but she grew up at the swap meet. So she has a very intimate connection to that place and to labor. And she's a designer at the Smithsonian. And we asked her what she would do if she had this space. And she said that she wanted to make a park. So she put a coming soon design that she made that was kind of thinking about a natural, uncurated park. And she had this whole philosophical idea about like what nature is and to what degree it should or should not be curated. And we basically threw up this coming sign soon. We had coffee, we had donuts, almost like a very relaxed.
Like an open air reception.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Press conference or something.
Right. As if you had invited the city leaders and everybody else to the opening of this proposed place.
They found out about it because people were sharing it on Facebook. And some of the council members who eventually came to like us were really upset because they're like, "That's not coming. That wasn't at the board meeting." um, yeah, there was another really cool. Well, Kirby did another one where she took all her mom's plastic bags. This is right before plastic bags were banned, right? So everyone's mom, right, has, or family has all these plastic bags in these drawers. So what she did is she took them out and she tried to figure out how to work with them, and eventually she was able to sculpt words, and she sculpted the words "ay corazón," which, if you speak Spanish, right, is kind of has the multiple uses of like dude, right? Like depending on how you say it, depending on your mood, you don't want to. It could mean all kinds of different things, right? You could be in trouble for not doing the dishes, you could be in trouble, or you could be missed, whatever it might be. And it's on the one single street that takes you to the 60 freeway, right? So we're like many communities east of East LA. A lot of our folks drive into work and drive back home, or they drive to school and they drive back home. So it was the one avenue that folks would see, and the idea was to sort of create almost like an emotional hologram or something like that. And the cool thing about that was that we put it up. We realized that if we put it up on Friday, the worker, I don't want to say they're too lazy, but like the workers were not going to go take it out on Friday because it might take them a while to figure it out. They might be trying to go home. If we put it up Friday, it would at least last until next Monday. So that one we put it up Friday, and one of the cool things about it was that my uncle, I'm Mexican, so I have a Mexican uncle, and there's variations of the Mexican uncle, but one variation is that he knows everything, and and regardless of how many degrees you have, you're still a nephew who doesn't know anything, right? So he was driving in the car with his daughter, and he was like, "Oh, look at that graffiti! Oh, this is horrible. This isn't art. This is ridiculous." And she knew it was us, so she was like, "No, it's great. I love it. Romeo did that. They're gonna take it to jail. They're gonna take it to jail." So it sparked this conversation, right, about what art should be and who gets ownership over it. And what we ended up doing is we took photographs, and we had people take photographs, and we were able to see that when they tried to take it down the first time, they weren't able to, so they had to go back that following Tuesday or something. So then it became this whole little conversation on Facebook around whether the city should or should not take it down.
Yep, that's basically it. Yeah, that was Activate Vacant.
Yeah, Activate Vacant as one of the Arts Posse's projects.
Right.
It's something that I found very interesting also in the volume East of East is that the Arts Posse is very active in developing documentation and archiving not just your own projects, but a lot of the other things that had happened in El Monte and South El Monte, and keeping track of, or at least getting recordings and archiving a lot of that material. So could you speak a little bit more about that, that kind of archival practice, not from I think what most people consider as the kind of standard sort of, librarian archival, work, but as a kind of creative discipline that helps to shape the stories and helps to create the representations that can then come out of it afterwards?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, as far as documentation, I'll jump in now because Romeo and I were just talking about something similar the other day. He asked me, when did you start calling yourself an arts writer? He's asking me. And I had a hard time answering. It was like something that I came into, but then we realized that I really started doing arts writing for our projects because we understood right away that no one was going to write about our projects. The LA Weekly wasn't going to write about us. The LA Times was never going to write about us. They still don't write about us. No one, the San Gabriel Valley Tribune wasn't going to write about us. So we knew that we had to write ourselves. And we had a blog because it's easy to get a WordPress. And so that's how we started. I started writing about our own project as a way to document. And that's really carried us pretty far. And I can talk about arts writing later if we wanted to, but that's kind of really where it started, this desire to document.
Yeah, and I think we realized that not only were people not going to write about us, but that we could probably do a better job of telling the story, or that we could control the narrative that we were producing. So it was important for us to sort of like control like what was being said, not control, but like to sort of shape the conversations that we wanted these projects to sort of create or to foster.
It also, though, seems like you have become almost informal archivists for the city. So in one of the pieces I was reading, I encourage everybody who's on the call to get this book, because many of the photographs and a lot of the material is all derived from the activities of the South of Monte Arts Posse. And I was particularly struck by, there was one mentioned, I can't remember in which essay it was, but it's about a film that El Monte had produced of itself at this moment, I believe in the 1970s, it's sort of in response to kind of its celebration of being a model city at one point and winning all these awards. And then there's this short film that's made about the city that I guess had been lost or that no one else had seen after it had been made, and that you recovered and had put up on the Arts Posse website and had made sort of available. And that somehow struck me as being a really important activity, not just for the activities of what you were doing, but also this archiving of what the city had been up to, even when the city wasn't interested in keeping track of those things in the past. You talk a little bit about that work that you've been doing to kind of excavate and to be, let's call it archaeologists of that urban area.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in here.
Sure.
So we've been doing a couple different projects that were very art specific, poetry readings or things like that. And then what happened is the city was turning 100. And, El Monte is not unlike all these other small cities in the sense that they really sort of, the center of their history is white pioneers, right? The settlers, the folks who founded the city. So all these sort of white men are the center of the history. And that's been the case in El Monte for the last 100 years or so. So we really use that as opportunity to think about, what is the history of El Monte? Because we knew that there was some pretty radical moments, right? We knew that Lincoln Stadium was there. We knew that there was a berry strike. So, folks had documented some of these aspects, usually when El Monte became so important that you couldn't avoid writing about it, right? So to the credit of these academics, we knew that El Monte mattered in some ways, but we really knew that this myth was really old and tired. And we also knew that, that Ricardo Flores Magón, this Mexican anarchist who flees into exile and forms a PLM and forms a sort of radical anarchist group in the US, that he had spent time in El Monte. And we knew that he had actually written from El Monte, I want to say to La Puente, to his brother, right, in the late 19-teens. And we also happened to be very good friends with Diego Flores Magón, which was a great grandson of Enrique. And Diego was in his own process in Mexico City where he was trying to rethink what an archive is. And I think the central question for him is if these are anarchist papers, how do we form an archive that is organic to the material and that it is not exclusionary and that it's not ruled by bureaucracy, right? So how can it be open? How can it be horizontal? So he was thinking about that, and we were thinking about how we can make arts, I don't want to say democratic, but more participatory, more grassroots. So we were both thinking about these things as El Monte was celebrating its 100-year anniversary. So we essentially applied to a grant from LA City, and this was kind of not a coup, but this was definitely some sort of something, because we're not part of LA City, but the folks read it and they liked it and they gave us money. So we got this big grant to essentially start doing two things, right? One is to reimagine what the history of El Monte is, and to build an archive in order to be able to do that. So we started this formal process where we had a bunch of events. It's been going on for a long time now, where we had to really think about what the archive was. And we had to go into people's garages, people's living rooms, the city hall basement. They gave us access to that. And we just scanned everything that we could. We recorded oral histories. And the book is really part of that process.
And the film was in there.
And the film was in there. And we didn't, how do I explain this? We actually didn't ask, we did not ask for permission, but we didn't ask for permission either.
Sure.
Not right away. So what we asked for was room to work. We went to the mayor, we explained the project, and the mayor said something like, I've never seen you on my park. And we're like, your park? Which one's your park, right? So we left that meeting feeling discouraged because, here we are, educated folks who are coming back to the community, who are bringing money, right? We're not asking them for money. We're just asking them for working space. And finally, someone told us, go have a beer with so-and-so, and he'll hook it up. So we did that. And then he talked to his other people, and then they figured it out. So they let us use the basement of City Hall. And, I'd like to make fun of Caribbean that journalists are metiches, right? Journalists like to get in people's business and ask questions they shouldn't be asking. So as good journalists, as good historians, we started just poking around all these boxes that were in the basement that had been forgotten about. And in that process, we finally told them that we're going to start scanning stuff. And then we kind of did. And then we finally told them that there was this film that needed to be digitized. So it was a really sort of slow process. And it was only when we wrote the book that we formally asked for copyright permission to be shared with the city. So it was a very piecemeal process. And looking back on it, I think, as a historian, I think we would have gone about it in different ways in terms of formalizing the process. But it was definitely an arts collective trying to think about how history works and how it should live and how to build an archive.
Do you think you would have had the same outcome had you tried to follow a more formal path?
I don't know. I mean, hearing Romeo right now, I remember this like saying that I basically shaped my whole life around mejor pedir perdón que pedir permiso, better to ask for forgiveness.
Ask forgiveness rather than permission.
And so that's kind of how we've operated. I don't know how it's going to turn out when our kid starts using it against us, but for our purposes, it's gotten us pretty far. Just saying.
Check it and make sure there's no South Monte City officials on here.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, no.
Academic free space.
Yeah, no, but the video is a really great question because they didn't know what it was, right? They didn't know what it was, and they had kind of forgotten that the city had received this big national award, and that's why it's noted on the logo. So not only had they forgotten that moment in time, but they completely had forgotten this film. So what we ended up doing was we told them, look, we need to see what's on this. And once we told them, we had them pay for the digitization of it, and we still have it.
Right. You have the original.
We haven't given it. Yeah, we have the original. And we're talking to CGU about that because I think it needs to be in a place that it can be preserved, right?
Sure. I mean, it's very interesting, the kind of sort of grassroots or street level informality that is less coming at something with a kind of big formalized project where you're trying to codify it into existing categories and you're trying to make sort of established history, but something that comes at it from the standpoint of artists or journalists or writers who are really kind of exploring threads and trying to figure things out and able to take turns when they are presented, or able to take advantage of opportunities when they are presented, without always asking permission first, right? Just kind of going ahead and doing something and then making sure that you're not trying to cross the boundaries. So this will start getting us into a little bit more of a kind of meta conversation, but how do you sort of go about thinking about the judgment for that? I think that we have students, we have colleagues or practitioners, like, when do you feel like you are approaching a line that you either might feel like crossing or might not want to cross? Do you have you go by gut, you go by internal radar? Do you all of a sudden think, wait a second, our children need us to make dinner this evening, so we better not do this? What's the metric that you've been able to use?
Our relatives, especially our parents, would say we have pretty bad judgment. No.
That's parents' responsibility. Keep you in check.
My parents. Well, the city and the whole thing with the mural and the frog, Louis. You want to say that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, you can
do tell.
Well, here's one line that we decided not to cross. Was it a couple of years ago? It was a couple of years ago. We had proposed a mural, a pretty big mural in the city of South Monte. And by then, the council members and the mayor had all decided that they liked us. So we had the favor of everybody we needed favor from. And we were going to move forward. We were securing a budget. We presented it to the city. People in the audience were very receptive. Everything was agreed. We just had all the green lights. And then one day, we check the news. We see it on Facebook, and we find out that our mayor was arrested for fraud. There was a FBI crackdown, and he had misappropriated funds, and I don't know what else he did, but he was going to jail. And so we decided not to cross that line of moving forward with the mural, because he was obviously involved in that, in shady practices, and also other council members that shall not be named were also in very sticky situations. And at some point we just decided not to cross that line. Like, we did not want to move forward with that project.
Yeah, and I would say he was taking bribes and envelopes in the bathroom, like just to be specific,
Oh,
right?
always a good
So
thing.
the LA Times did write about this, right? So
That's right.
About something Monte del Monte. And I joke with Caribbean that if I were to get stabbed holding the book, they might mention the book. The stabbing, of course, but maybe the book. But what we did do instead though, is we ended up working with those muralists because we had a friend that runs a nonprofit, and they do open streets, David Diaz. So what happened there is we just said, hey man, like, could we do a workshop or something? He said yes. And then I don't know if you know this, but because I was in grad school still, but David and I basically pitched in for like a small honorarium for all the art supplies. I think it was like 1K total to make this like mural in his family's house facing the street, Central Park. So what we did is since that big option fell through, we just made a smaller one as a way to sort of mark place and as a way to just say like, this is our idea. And what's happened recently, which is kind of I don't know if it's a lesson or what, but it's also maybe another line that we've not crossed yet, and I think it's going to be very difficult to think through. But the city of El Monte at some point decided that they're going to have their own mural revival, and they're using development money, right? So they're using all this sort of development money, which is essentially connected to displacement, right? Displacement of working class folks, increasing rents. And we didn't submit a proposal, and we didn't submit anything, and I think they want us to be part of it, but we're probably not going to be part of that.
Is that direct development money, or is that percent for art program type of money where developers, in order to be able to do the work, have to submit a certain percentage to the city to fund arts and cultural projects?
Yeah, it's that.
Percent for art projects.
I think it's just tricky for us because it's not, we're no longer directing this thing that we essentially excavated ourselves. So it's this weird thing where it's, are they appropriating us? Are they borrowing? Are they pushing things forward? So another example of like how we navigate that, right? Which is that the owner of a brewery that's in South of Monte approached us about doing a mural, right? And the owner for that was going to pay for the wall and then the honorarium and all that stuff. And that for us was a lot easier. And we went to the artist, we talked about it. And the idea was actually to throw up the mural and then have a big party at the brewery with the book. But then COVID came and those things fell through. So I think one of the big questions for us is always like, are we okay with the ethics of this? And are we okay with like where the funding's coming from? And they can be very difficult situations and difficult conversations, I think.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Boom California and some of the sort of other public writing and other public projects that you've been involved in, and also what it takes to mount a publication like that. Well, actually, you know what? Let's take one step back. I have another question that I wanted to ask you before we get into this sort of more journalism topics. So now that East of East has been published and represents this sort of gargantuan project with all of these various different authors, I think some of them are actually on the call with us this evening. What's next for South El Monte Arts Posse? What's next for the sort of loose group of collaborators that you've been working with?
Yeah, there's a couple things in the works, right? One is that Miles is on this call, and Miles is actually, again, like we sort of did the thing, and now that we've done it, I think it's easier to say, these were steps that we should have taken. Had we known what we were doing, right? But we were kind of doing it very organically. But one of the big next steps is in the spring, I'm teaching a class called Archives 311. And my class will essentially build a digital archive. So Miles right now is actually organizing it, getting an inventory of all the items. So there'll be a digital companion to the book. In addition to that, we're applying to the Whiting Fellowship, the Public Fellows Humanity invited us to apply. And for that, the idea is to do bike rides that are inspired by the primary and secondary sources. So I know Adam's on this call, right? So like a bike ride to the Shabika factory where there was this big sort of raid and then there's all this resistance stuff. And we're also supposed to we have a budget for murals, right? For the Whiting one, and then curriculum building. So the idea is that we would build curriculum with high school teachers so they can use both the book and the digital collection. So those are sort of like very concrete things that are a bit more loose. Is we're participating in the fall, next fall, with Our Public Library. And for that, we're trying to think about like how we can push the book and really continue to attack El Monte's official history. And we're going after the logo this time. So one of the ideas is to invite artists to redesign the logo. One of the ideas is also to essentially have like a fake call for a new museum. So like invite people to imagine the museum as if we're actually, as if they actually gave it to us. They're probably not gonna ever do that. But the idea is like, if we had this museum, what would be some permanent items that we would collect? What would be some, well, how would we use the halls and the rooms, right? What kind of director would we look for, right? Like, who you know, we'd take calls for that or something like that. So there's a bunch of different little things that are in the works. The other one that we're thinking about, and we haven't told anybody yet, so this is, you all are kind of first, but we didn't write the book to make money from it, and we're not going to make money from it. But we do have these little engagements, right, that end up, you know, giving us $100, $200. So what we're thinking of doing is creating like an art fund where, you know, honorariums that we get from, specifically from East of East Book, we can sort of have these little micro grants that can go to El Monte, Soto Monte, emerging artists or folks that have connections to it to do their own projects. As a way to sort of almost like build the infrastructure that we didn't have when we started.
Yeah. So for me, I think I get most excited when I think about how we can most support the arts. I mean, stuff like the museum is cool. It's interesting and exciting. But for me, when I think about the art and what kinds of new projects we can develop, that's most appealing to me. So, I mean, we don't have a lot of bandwidth right now. We have 2 kids and we have a lot of different things going on. So it's harder to take over vacant lots and do things like what we did years ago. But maybe younger people who, you know, might use that money that we will make available will make new projects, and that'll be really good.
Super interesting. Yeah, and keep expand the posse. Expand the collaborators. The museum project sounds amazing, and we should definitely continue talking about that, because I know that our colleague Josh Good in the Museum Studies program and colleagues of ours in the Arts Management Art Business program have been thinking of these of museum projects, and we've also been trying to think with our friends at the Southern California Institute of Architecture at SciArc about trying to do a collaborative class. And so maybe we could get a studio at SciArc doing the designs for a potential museum in El Monte, South El Monte. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
And
getting the wheels turning.
The thing is, there's so much art that's been done in or about El Monte that's floating around, right? We have Fang Lian's piece that she gave to us that ended up being part of the mural project for Metro. We love it in our living room, but you know, that could be a part of an object that goes to the museum. In the 60s and 70s, Scribbin wrote about this. But there was a bunch of artists, right, that were actually making work in El Monte, and we don't know where that work is.
Yeah. So it'd be a really cool project if we could contact all of these artists like Harry Gamboa, Nancy Yodelman, Gronk, I think was part of a bunch of other artists that came to El Monte and made original artwork about El Monte, and eventually moved on to Found Lace, which is in Hollywood now. But where is all this artwork now? I don't know where it is. I think there was a show maybe at Cal State LA at some point, but it'd be really interesting to see and perhaps recover some of that work. For sure, and put together an archival historical show, a good exhibition to think about for the future too. Lots of good ideas coming out of this. Yeah. So now let's switch gears and tell us a little bit about Boom California. And I'll say, just by way of introduction, before I had even connected that journal to you two as the editors and to its larger mission and its kind of locality, a number of people had been sharing pieces from it on Twitter, and it was coming across my streams. And so when I looked a little bit deeper into it and then found your bios and saw that you were connected to this, I thought that this must be, written in the stars in some sense. So tell me a little bit about Boom California and the work that's gone into producing and editing and keeping that operation going.
Yeah. Jump in and then
I'll. Okay.
Because I also, given the amount that you're involved in, I don't believe that you don't have the bandwidth for these projects. You seem to be remarkably productive, given that you have 2 children and it's a pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay. Boom California is a journal out of UC Press, and it's about 10 years old. And it was basically UC Press's effort to try to think about how to write for a large audience. So the first couple of years it was in print. I think you could get it at Bonds. It was like everywhere. Eventually that model was no longer sustainable, right? So now it's an online print magazine. But the idea is to really combine like the beauty of long form journalism with the insight of academics, right? Academic scholarship. So it really does try to mesh those two worlds. And, you know, in that sense, most of our pieces are around 5K. They're not sort of filled with jargon, and they're definitely not, I don't want to say they're not well cited, but like the depth of citation is not what concerns us. Like, as long as it's clear that there's a sort of contribution. So we're really trying to write about California in ways that are accessible for sort of a large audience, and say like an undergrad or something like that. And as editors, I think maybe the first year there was somebody, but as editors, we're the first people of color in the last couple of years. So before us, it was Jason. Before that, it was John. Both wonderful editors. So one of our goals has really been to take that to heart and to think about what it means to be, you know, people of color editors of this thing called Boom California. And we've tried really hard, and we have gaps, of course, but we've tried really hard to center both people of color and regions that are overlooked, right? Regions that may not get talked about, written about. It's still hard to escape LA and San Francisco, and
Sure.
if you read Boom, you'll see that there's still like a strong LA component, but, you know, we do what we can. And I think, you know, when you look back at all the issues, right, you know, you ask like, okay, what did this editor bring, or what did these editors bring, and how did they shift it or contribute? And I think one of our contributions, at least, has been this thing called postcards, which I'll let Kriven talk about.
Yeah. And before I forget, and before I talk about postcards, we just moved to Claremont, back to SoCal from Fresno. We were living there for about 4 years. And we really wanted to bring the Central Valley into focus. So that's something that we're still working on. Again, the pandemic interrupted a lot of things, and that's one of the things that interrupted as well. But that's something we want to continue to develop. The Central Valley is enormous and so important to California in so many ways, so many huge ways. And so we want to continue to do that. So that's one of our contributions,
Definitely.
And then the postcards, of course. And the postcards are a series of writings about place, to put it most simply. But they're usually first-person essays about a community or a town or a city that most often doesn't get written about. So we have a piece about San Pedro, California. We have a piece about Bakersfield. We have a piece about Pacifica, California up north. A piece about Janice Miller's this specific
Panamanians in LA.
this really specific Panamanian community in South LA. And then we have another piece coming up by Ruth Nolan about the Mojave Desert and fighting fires as a way of taking care of place and as a way of belonging to place. So these essays are personal, and but they're also they're personal, but they also work to give us more context and like a more expansive understanding of what California is, again, beyond these really centralized locations. So again, we want to really like expand like our vision of what California is and what voices deserve attention. And then we always commission Fernando Corona, who's an artist from Mexicali. And he has been doing excellent illustrations for all of our work. So it's been really nice to build these relationships between the artist, the illustrator, and the writer, and ourselves. So we're really proud of what we have so far. We want to continue doing that.
Yeah, and we'll put out a call pretty soon for a new round of submissions, or we're going to accept submissions again in December or January for those ones. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And so that it's interesting because California is this enormous place, right? And I think that I'm new here. I've only lived here for a handful of years, so I'm a complete and total tourist, and just beginning to learn about it. But I found I think the article that sort of really resonated when just was published in, I think, the last issue, about the sort of Confederate monuments in California, and this kind of breaking of the spell for someone from the East Coast who imagined California as this kind of, as the forward edge of the country, the leading edge of sort of social movements of technology, innovation, aerospace, as well as some of the sort of more difficult parts of U.S. history, from segregation, from discrimination, and the way that land use has in California in particular has really been a tool for creating inequity. And so it was interesting to sort of see this as like a journal with these articles that created sort of poignant sort of directions that weren't just sort of taking one political stand, but using history and using a kind of representation to bring out more complexity, showing how, you know, the country has sort of come this direction to the West, and the West has kind of infiltrated back into the rest of the rest of the country at the same time. And you know, I'm working towards a question here, but I just wanted to sort of get this sort of monologue out, because I'd encourage again everybody to take a look at this and bookmark it or get it into your regular feeds, because it's a great kind of, you know, I think about it as one of these things that does exactly, Romeo, what you were describing, is like the audience is a general audience, but these very intelligent pieces that are steeped in history, give enough reference that you're not sort of checking the footnotes or think that you're reading something that's just been produced for a very small academic community who's out there checking everyone's footnotes at the same time. So it makes it a little bit of an easier read at the same time too.
Yeah, and we try hard to think about not what's topical, but like what kind of pieces can we publish that would illuminate what's going on in a way that maybe, you know, a journalist doesn't have the time or the bandwidth to do, right? So we try to anticipate those things sometimes. So we're introducing a series of interviews with climate change activists or climate crisis activists. So that's coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think this sort of dovetails back into the sort of digital presence of the South of Monte Art Posse and the sort of digital presence of Boom California. And it's something that I think that for students in our programs, both the art business arts management programs, but also more broadly in the kind of arts and history environment, that these kinds of, it's not just about going digital, it's about creating these sort of journals or collectives or things that can have different types of footprints across various different channels that are able to like make a mark, create an archive, gather people together, start a dialogue. And so I'm curious to hear from you, you know, given that you've got a lot of experience in this, and maybe this is a good question for you, Caribbean, but sort of what have you been reading or seeing on the horizon that's most kind of enlivening and exciting for you in terms of either new artistic practices, new writers, new platforms that you're seeing, new opportunities in the arts and cultural fields that you think are going to be fairly vigorous in the next 6 months, the next 12 months, the next 2 years, 5 years, whatever time horizon you wanna think about them in. And I frame this because I know that we have a lot of people who are sort of very anxious about what the future holds, very anxious about what's happening to the arts and cultural fields, not just here in Southern California, but across the country. And from my opinion, I think that the future is absolutely at street level, absolutely at grassroots, absolutely at collective, collaborative, dynamic activity. I don't know what shape that's going to take or where it's going to take place. But it has an interesting relationship to place, like you were talking about. And so I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about that too, how these kinds of activities that sometimes seem divorced from any sort of specific place in the world, given their ability to exist online like this, can reground themselves in the specificity of place, especially in a post-pandemic moment. That was a very long question, I'm sorry.
You want to jump in, or do you want to just roll?
I mean, that's like your world, but that like we're excited about Dryland because they seem to like, we think that we're like similar, like they're super cool, so we're like, oh, maybe we're kind of like them. So we're really excited to see what they produce and to see them working and working in places, right, where you wouldn't expect it, but like places where it's needed, right? So I think Dryland for me is something that's really cool.
And that's a literary publication, right? And they're based out of Southeast LA, I want to say. Yeah, they're super cool. I'm looking at well, I recently started learning about the Dairy Mart in Crenshaw. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's it was founded by Patrice Cullors of Black Lives Matter, and she and other activists and artists started this. Basically, they converted a drive-through Dairy Mart into an art space, an exhibition space, and sort of community center. And I've heard that Patrice Colors is interested in developing some sort of like either free or completely online art school, which I think I'm always interested in hearing conversations about how people are thinking of alternatives to art school. And maybe that's a separate conversation. Again, the appeal for me with the Dairy Mart again is that it's this space that was abandoned or underused, and it was converted or is in the process of being converted into this like very community-based grassroots art center. And then with that, I am a huge admirer of Summa Everything. That's Lauren Halsey. And I first learned about Lauren Halsey at the Hammer Museum for the last biennial. And she won this huge award for her work there. But I really admired like her visions of South Central LA, which is where she's from. But like just this sort of like an Afrofuturistic vision of history and future at the same time. And I'm still sort of like wrapping my head around that, but I find that like really exciting that she's thinking in all these like directions at the same time, and that she started her own thing called Summa Everything. So those kinds of things really make me very excited. And I don't know, there's other like sort of institutional relationships that I'm curious to see what happens. I don't know, such as the collaboration between the Huntington Library and Gardens and Art Collection and the Hammer Museum. I just remembered right now that was supposed to happen for the next biennial.
Right.
And I don't know what the status is on that. I don't know if anybody here does, but I thought that was interesting, mainly because of the location of the Huntington and the San Gabriel Valley, but they have a very particular place in the San Gabriel Valley as this very sort of elite institution. So anyway, I'm curious to see where those things go.
This might get into, you know, semi-sensitive areas, so you tell me if this is not something you want to discuss, but I'm very excited by a bunch of these new initiatives too, things like Dairy Mart, and you mentioned earlier also the sort of the worry about development and the potentials for that pushing out or raising property values, creating gentrification, so on and so forth. How do you think about or navigate that sort of, you know, the fact that the arts can be an immense force for change and transformation, very good for community development, communities coming together and building. They also happen to be a very good force for economic development, and they've been used for those purposes either through real estate development or simply through creating sort of migratory patterns amongst sort of young or educated folks moving around trying to find places to live when they come out of their various different graduate programs. So maybe from the perspective of El Monte, South El Monte, or other things that you've experienced yourselves, because you know, you went to Cal Arts. I know, Romeo, you went to Columbia. I mean, you've got sterling CVs as well. How do you navigate this question about what kind of development is the right development? What kind of community engagement is the right engagement when you're talking about trying to bring the arts into an area that maybe hasn't had it before, and making sure that the people there are let's say appropriately part of the development that you'd like to see?
That's a great question. I think one of the unique things about El Monte and South El Monte is that development looks really different, right? So we don't have galleries, we don't have hip coffee shops, we don't have what folks would call gentrifiers, like white middle class educated folks, you know, wherever they're coming from. We don't really have that kind of processes taking place. We do have homes that are, you know, $700,000, right? And they're mainly being bought for their proximity to Arcadia. So it's foreign money that's coming in, and sometimes they're paying cash. So it looks really different. And I don't want to say that the questions are easier for us, but we're not getting invited by a new gallery to show art.
Sure.
In a sort of gentrifying neighborhood, right? So it's really different. But what I can offer, and maybe Kerwin has more on this, is that I had Sandra de la Losa and Arturo Romo come to my class 2 weeks ago to talk about their visions of a new monument and how to reimagine the monument itself. And I think they're two artists, and Caribbean's written about them, that really do take these questions very seriously and that are embedded in the community. So I think for them, and I'm speaking for them, but you all can read up and ask them yourselves. I think for them, the community comes first, and they ask how the art can help that process. So I think, there are people that I think have not figured out, but they've arrived to an approach that makes sense for them as artists and community members.
Yeah. I think one of the most valuable experiences for me was working with my Zumba ladies in the Zumba studios, because I just started going to the Zumba studio, not to start an art project, but because I wanted to do Zumba. Like, that was the only reason. And because it's affordable, and because I came to really respect the camaraderie and like the kind of sisterhood amongst these poor and working class Latina mothers. That's who raised me. I felt really connected to that. But I eventually started doing a project with them, and we did a lot of writing, and that was really valuable because I got to hear what they needed. I got to learn what their concerns were and what their needs were. And at the time, they had to do with safe streets. They were really concerned about getting run over. And that's like a thing, like a really serious thing, like having safe streets that you can walk on and ride bikes on. And then over the years, housing emerged as another very big concern. And we, as a project with the LA Tenants Union and the Hammer Museum, I got to learn more about how those issues were playing out in the community with all of these families that participated in the workshop. And so I think that's always like the first and most important step, like just to be there and to learn from the community. If that's really what we care about, like to be grounded in this place, like you have to care about the people, not just the place. It's not just about buildings or about parks, or the people are what matter to me. Anyway, so I guess in moving forward with projects, that's something that I would always want to start off and be really rooted in.
Sure. I want to remind everybody who's joining us that if you've got questions, by all means, put them into the chat so that we can forward them along. While you're putting those together, I'll ask one more. You have a great line in the book, Caribbean. I think it was yours. You said that El Monte is sort of uniquely immune to the arts. It has been over time, and so I want to ask, what in your opinion has created that immunity, and does it still exist today? Okay, and how might you overcome it?
Oh man, so there's a lot of art that gets made in El Monte and South El Monte. It's known for its like punk scene. It's known for other things. I grew up around very creative filmmakers and animators and musicians and really creative thinkers, but there's not now or ever been, as far as I know, real institutional support for that. There's no arts education programming. Whatever you got in high school, maybe you got it, maybe you didn't. So there's no like real city-led initiatives to support that creativity into something beyond the hobby that quickly dissolves once you get a job and have responsibilities. So that talent and creativity and passion is there, but there hasn't been any efforts that I know of that have really supported that. And so I think one of the things that we're trying to do is really emphasize how that, number one, all of that matters, that the creativity of people in the community matters, and that we really need to push city officials and other leaders to make the arts an integral part of the community fabric. And they have to commit funds to it and attention, and somehow we have to get them to care. I don't know if we're always successful, but that's something that we have to keep pushing. And I think one of the things for me that I've always thought about it for El Monte and South El Monte is we're not this huge mammoth city like the city of LA. We're like these little two independent cities We're like Siamese twins. We're attached at the hip. We belong to each other. We can do what we want. We can do, I mean, we're not part of some crazy, enormous bureaucracy. I mean, let's have some vision. And I just never give up on the possibility of convincing people that it's really important to support the arts in different ways.
I mean, we've been invited to talk about the map or whatever, like on the west side and East LA, not too much out here, but obviously CGU, right? I don't think we've ever been invited to talk about our work in El Monte or South El Monte. We always have to organize events, and when we do, it's at the senior center or maybe at the library, but the South El Monte Library doesn't want us because there's not enough space. So there's no real home to like showcase any of this stuff.
The brewery is supported.
The brewery's dope. The brewery's dope. Progress Brewery, and you can drive by.
That sounds a lot better than the library. I'm sorry. I'm sure the library is wonderful, but so one other question then. So what is the one thing that you think about El Monte that could make it a kind of model for arts and cultural development, either from a community standpoint, from the institutional standpoint, or the lack thereof, for other similar sized cities, similar sized regions and other places, not just here in California, but elsewhere in the country?
Yeah,
what does El Monte have that we could that could, you know, that makes it something that you could model for another place?
That's a really good question. I hope that we're modeling something where we come back to the community, or we kind of never really leave, even though we leave, and we bring resources, whatever we have, even if it's just a WordPress, or even if it's just a connection to CGU, like whatever it is, like just grabbing what you can, bringing it back, and like never giving up. Because so many people, at least in El Monte and South El Monte that I know, just kind of leave, and they recognize how much they were shaped by that place that they're from, but they know that they can't go back, because what are they going to do there? There's no job opportunities, and frankly, the housing is just absurdly expensive for what it is, especially. And so I think our sort of really grassroots model that we've been trying to do is something that I would say is maybe I mean, I don't know. I think just don't give up, keep doing your thing, bring your resources. And then hopefully, I mean, once the leadership gets a hint and they decide that they want to support the arts and creativity in this place, hopefully we can all find a place in the middle where we can meet. And hopefully this can happen, if not in our community, maybe in other people's communities.
And El Monte, actually, maybe like 15 years ago, the White Museum, which is what it's called colloquially, had like a little corner. I've only heard this. I didn't see this. It had a little corner where they had photographs of Mexicans from the Mexican barrios, right? So the Mexicans got mad, and they're like, we want our own museum. And there happened to be a Mexican mayor, the first Mexican mayor of El Monte was in power, so he gave them a space, and they pay $1 a year or something like that. And that's really grown for what it is, right? It's a very local archive, and they do a really good job of documenting the barrios from El Monte, but they've become a sort of reunion place for the old generations, right? So I think sometimes it's simple as just giving someone space and then letting them do what they want with it. And that's been really successful for that particular archive. And it doesn't seem that hard, but maybe it is. I don't know.
They're called La Historia Society, and
they're very dear to us. Yeah, we like
great.
them a lot.
No, that sounds amazing. Well, we've been going for about an hour, so I don't want to keep you all that much longer. I know that we've got children and other responsibilities aside from all our intellectual activities. I want to thank you so much for your time and your intelligence, and I really look forward to the next conversation and what we might be able to do all together now that we're all in the same boat here.